morning, this is Plant Smart Living with Farmer Fred. Really glad you could join me today out here in the vegetable garden. It's a beautiful day here in Pennsylvania, Zone 6. Well, today I wanted to share with you how I harvest my tasty and delicious Detroit dark red beets. So thanks for joining me today out here in the vegetable garden. Here in Pennsylvania, we've been having a lot of nice warm weather. We've had nice rain once a week, and so the garden is just flourishing and thriving. The plants just love the heat. You know, the tomatoes, the peppers, your classic eggplant that I have in the garden, and so I've been picking the eggplant, and the peppers have just been growing and thriving. My curly leaf kale and the Swiss chard Ford Hook giant, they're all just thriving in the garden. I grow all my vegetables in my composted leaf mulch that I amend with topsoil. So these were the Detroit dark red beet seeds that I direct sowed out in the garden a couple months ago. And they have a little bit of information they provide in the back here. Detroit dark red is delicious and unbeatable for canning and pickling. It has a robust, sweet flavor with an intense, bright, crimson red color. The 13 to 16-inch glossy tops are tasty and nutritious greens, rich in vitamins A and C. And so let me encourage you to think about growing red beets in your garden. It's something really easy to do. I direct sow these out in the soil about a ½ inch deep, and you know, during the germination period you want to make sure you keep that soil nice and moist. And it typically takes about 58 days for these red beets to reach maturity. Mine have been in the ground for a little bit over 2 months, and so you know, they're nice size. And my wife and I like to freeze our red beets for the winter. They store well for about 1 year in the freezer. You just want to bring them to boil and then put them on low heat until they're fork tender, and then we slice them up and put them in heavy-duty freezer bags and store them over the winter. I use them as a side dish or also in my salads. So I grew these in my 4-foot by 8-foot raised bed, and they're right behind me over there in my back garden. So why don't you follow me along and I'll show you where they are. So this is the 4-foot by 8-foot bed that I grew these red beets in. And I have 4 rows of these red beets that are about 8 feet long. And when I direct sowed these in the soil about a ½ inch deep, I spaced them anywhere from 1 to 2 inches apart. And then when they come up from the soil, you can thin them out about 2 inches apart. And then again, you want to make sure you keep these well watered during the week, especially during the germination period. Now you can see here in front of me that these leaves they're blotchy. They have dark brown patches on them, and they're caused by the leaf miner. It's a fly larva, and they produce these blotches on the leaves. It's mostly cosmetic, and so I grow my red beets here mostly for the beet, not so much for the beet green, although I know plenty of people just grow them just for the leafy green. But I have a lot of Swiss chard and kale in my garden also that I mostly use those for the leafy greens. And my wife and I just love these red beets that we freeze over the winter. That way I can have them all year long. And so these have been growing for 60, 70 days, maybe even a little bit more. And so the size of these red beets probably range anywhere from like the size of a golf ball to a tennis ball, maybe even to a baseball. And so all you're simply going to do is just grab them by the tops and pull them out from the soil. Something really easy to do. And again, you can see how easy they just pull right out of the soil. You can also, when you go to direct sow your seeds in the garden, you can soak them overnight to help germination. And also, depending on what size beets you want, you may want to thin these out maybe anywhere from 2 to 4 inches. I was just noticing I have a large red beet right here. This one's probably the size of a baseball, maybe even a little bit larger. Let's take a closer look. So you can see this is a nice size one here. This one here is a little bit bigger than a golf ball. And this is a nice size one here too. So what I'm going to do is just go through and harvest all these now. And I'm just going to lay them right on top of the ground here. I also have some a vine growing in here. This is actually a morning glory vine. A couple years ago I direct seeded some morning glories to grow up one of our trellises, and I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, because those morning glories just reseed themselves and you end up having morning glories growing everywhere. So I actually did a video about, you know, beware of growing the morning glory vine in your garden, because the next season, the season after we grew these, in the springtime we had just a carpet of these morning glory vines, seeds coming up everywhere. And so yeah, there's some small ones in here. Definitely some larger ones. Here's one about the size of a golf ball, maybe a ping pong ball. And I'm just going to pull all these out and we'll lay them right along the side here so we can see how many I harvested. Now I realize the larger ones may be a little bit on the woody side, but that's okay, because I boil them and cut them up in small pieces and put them mostly in my salads. That's mostly where I like my red beets. But talk about something so tasty and nutritious. There's a real large one right here. And so this was the first 2 rows, and then I have these other rows right here, these last 2 rows. I see Bailey's joining us out here in the garden this morning. But having this nice, loose, friable soil, these red beets pull out real easy. I always go through my garden beds before I direct sow my seeds and work it with my garden fork. But I get all my composted leaf mulch from Orange Side Compost. I typically get about 5 yards every season. And so I have a few more on the end to get. But this ended up being a really nice harvest. So I'm going to lay these all out alongside the raised bed here. Most of the time I end up growing my red beets underneath my low tunnel hoop house that's covered by a spun bonded polyester cloth to keep the leaf miner off the leaves. I just noticed a few sun gold cherry tomatoes laying over there on the ground. These are just my favorite tomato to grow in the garden, so sweet and tasty. And so I have all these red beets laid out. Let's take a closer look. What are you doing, Bailey? Bailey enjoys the kale in the garden. That's tasty and delicious, isn't it, Bailey? What are you doing, boy? He's a good boy. Red beets are another vegetable that I enjoy eating right out of the garden. I generally pick a nice small one here. I just lightly brush the dirt off them, and they are so tasty and packed with nutrition. Well, it sure was fun harvesting these Detroit dark red beets. I'm looking forward to boiling these up and freezing them for the winter. If you have any questions or comments about this video, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. And you can also visit us at PlantSmartLiving.com. And there you can learn more about gardening and also how you can reclaim and restore your health by adopting a whole food, plant-based, vegan lifestyle. Well, anyhow, I hope you have a wonderful day today and a bountiful garden season. They're also calling for some temperatures like in the high 80s, so it's starting to get pretty humid out here in the garden. Well, anyhow, thanks for joining me today out here in the garden.